Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sharice and today we're going to be discussing deposits and whether you need to sell a kidney, a lung or any other body part in order to get one. So a few weeks ago I put out a poll on my Instagram. If you're not following, I would suggest you do so. It's at Sharice Rogers Official. The question I asked was, asking people just to reach out if they had any questions regarding property or anything that they'd be interested to find out. One of the questions I got was, do I need to sell my kidney in order to get a deposit? Now, it's funny, but it's a valid question. In the UK, we've seen house prices shoot up to astronomical levels, much less if you look at London in particular, it's even more ridiculous. And so it definitely is very concerning and very disheartening for someone who's a first-time buyer to think about how they might actually get on the property ladder. Obviously, the deposit is the first thing you start to think about because that's a massive part of your purchase and your investment in getting on the property ladder. And so people are wondering, how do they actually achieve it? So I thought in this video, I'm not going to be able to tell you how to get to your deposit in a practical sense. Obviously, there's so many different factors that will impact how you will be able to achieve it. But what I'm going to do is share a bit of my experience and the experience I had when I was going through my property purchase. I actually speak a little bit about this in my book, Moving On Up, a fully comprehensive guide to first-time buyers to help them graduate from generation rent to home ownership, and this is available actually on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle format, and it will also be available as a downloadable ebook on my website, which is sharice-rogers.com. But I do touch upon this process in my book. So like I said, the deposits are daunting. When you look at house prices and you think about what you would need as a 10% minimum deposit, if you're going to go down the traditional mortgage relationship with the bank, it would scare you a little bit. So when I was going through the process of looking for property, the way in which I approached it was this. I spoke to a mortgage advisor to get an understanding of, number one, based on my salary and based on my full financial profile. So my salary and earnings, my commitments and any debts, credit score, etc. Those types of things. What could I typically go to a bank and comfortably get as a range for a mortgage? And they were able to tell me a figure. And from that figure, I looked at my 10%. And that gave me my motivation. That was my goal. If I could get to this number, so for argument's sake, if we said it was £10,000, if I could get to that number, what do I need to do in order to comfortably get there? So this is where you start to look at your current situation. Now, it's not to teach anyone how to suck eggs, but kind of understanding your financial profile, it should give you an awareness and an ability to then make adjustments so that you can step forward to achieve your goals. So for example, for me, I sat down and actually did a fully comprehensive budget. And I'll take you through how I did that, I should say. But a fully comprehensive budget to understand what I was earning, what I was actually spending my money on, and where I could actually make changes to ensure that I was able to save more money in order to get to my goal as quickly as possible. So for example, literally got a sheet of paper and a pen, and I wrote down how much money came into my bank account in a given month. So I looked over a period of 3 months just to get a trend. Then I went through my bank statements, which is something I would encourage everyone to do because you'd be surprised how many gaps, especially in a world where we live with contactless payments, where it's so easy to just tap in and tap off and spend money that way, and kind of where we're not really just taking out a lump of cash and being very mindful of how much we're spending, but being very taking these steps to just go through and go through your bank statements and look at the types of things you're spending your money on. So for example, if you are going to your 9 to 5, do you find that you're spending maybe £3 to £4 every morning on a cup of coffee? Maybe should we say £2 to £4 every day on a cup of coffee? and then maybe anything from £5 to £7 every day on some lunch, all of that starts to add up. If, for example, you were buying a fully loaded Frappuccino from Starbucks every day, Monday to Friday, so 5 times a week, and that costs, we say on average, and we say, let's go for a large one every morning. Not only will that add to your waistline, but it's going to take away from your bank account. So if it was £4.50 every morning, and you're doing that 5 times a week, you're looking at £22.50 a week on a coffee. Then let's take into account, maybe let's be cheap, say you're on a meal deal, so £5 every day for lunch, for argument's sake, on the cheaper end of the spectrum. If you're working in central London, it's probably a bit more, but let's say £5. That's £25 every week. That's just shy of £45 a week on coffee and some lunch. If we assume that there's 4 weeks in every month, you're looking at under £200, so 170 something pounds a month on coffees and lunch. Now, if that's your only vice and that's what you want to do, then fine. However, if you're working towards a goal, is there something there that you can adjust? Can you make your coffee at home in the morning and bring it into work? Buy a different coffee which is cheaper? Could you maybe make your lunches at home and bring them so that you're saving some of that money? Anything that you can shave off of your expenses and put towards your savings will get you closer to your goal. So that's something that I did. So for example, I wasn't certainly not spending every day buying lunch or buying coffee. However, I was doing it a fair bit in the week. And so for me, that was something I decided I could cut back on in order to make the savings for what I needed. Looking at things such as the amount that you spend on clothing or going out. Are there little tweaks that you can make in order to ensure that you can obviously still have a life, but you can still be more sensible in order to get to your goal? It's something I believe in, but where your mindset is, your action follows. And so for me, once I set my mind to the fact that I was trying to get to a specific goal in order to save for the property that I wanted to purchase, at this point I hadn't actually found the property, but I knew I was going to buy a house, and I knew I had a type of house I wanted to buy, and I had an idea in my head what roughly I was looking for. And so once I got that in my head, that became the vision, and that became the goal, and that became the purpose of how I was moving forward. And so certain things, it became very easy to give up. Purchasing clothes and trainers and all the different vices and stuff that I liked, and makeup and all that kind of stuff, it became less important. So it was easier for me to save in those things. I made sure to focus on, any debts. Did I have any extraneous debts that I could clear that might be, maybe shaving off a few points of my credit score? So yeah, going through your bank statements to see where you're actually spending the majority of your money, and using that as an opportunity to make adjustments in order to make better decisions and to find better ways to save is one of the ways that I would advise, kind of looking at how you can get to your goal. Another thing in order to build up your financial profile is kind of looking at stuff such as your credit score. For example, you can use something like Experian, and I think they do free credit reports, and they also have a paid for service, but there's also ClearScore. And ClearScore is completely free, and it's an app, and every month they'll send you an update on what your credit report and your credit score is. And these are really useful. They use different ways in which to work out your credit score, but these are across industry standards. So Experian is an industry standard, and the company that drives the data into ClearScore is also an industry standard. So these, you can best bet, are the ones that are most likely to be looked at by your banks when they're kind of using that to build out your financial profile. So if you go through your credit report, you will see if there's anything, for example, like outstanding debts. So for example, if you had any CCJs, or if you had any defaults on your account. So default is if you've not made a payment, so you have an outstanding balance on something and it's just sitting there to the point where your account might be closed. So for example, you might have not paid a phone bill for argument's sake. They're chasing you for that money, you haven't paid the money, and so after a certain point they just put a default on your account. So that default will sit on your account for I think 6 years, I think. So anything along those lines, if you have those types of things on your credit report, you want to get those addressed. So whether that's a case that you clear the balance on an outstanding debt, or whether it is a case that it could be an incorrect default put in your account, or incorrect information being put in your account, and therefore you want to approach the vendor to get that adjusted. Things like that are really important. On these types of systems, they also show you, or they tend to suggest ways in which you can improve your credit score. So for example, if you're not on the electoral roll, they'll let you know, look, if you're not on the electoral roll, you want to do that will improve your credit score over time. If you've taken out, if you've done multiple applications in a very short period of time for a credit card or anything along those lines, that will have an impact on your credit score as well, because what it says to a lender is, I struggle to manage money. So things like that you really want to be mindful of, and I would suggest everyone just have a look at your credit reports just to see where you are. And it's just a good way to just keep a kind of a health check on your finances. Again, the purpose of this video is not to tell you how to manage your money, but I think these are things that kind of play into how you get to your goal if you're looking at something like a deposit. Being mindful also of the types of property that you're looking at. Now for me, when I was searching for my property, I really wanted to stay in my original area where I grew up. However, London house prices and prices in that particular area are not to be played with, right? They're just, let's be honest. And for me to afford a property in that area, it was not going to happen without the help of a billionaire and a few of their friends, because it's so pricey. So I had to really adjust my mindset as to how I could get on the property ladder, because that was the main goal, not just so much a case of buy a house in the area where I love, but the main goal was to get on the property ladder. So I had to really kind of adjust my thinking about what that looks like. And for me, what I did was kind of make compromises. You kind of have to make compromises to figure out what's gonna work for you. So for me, it meant looking outside of the area where I grew up. So moving further out in order to find properties which were closer to my price range, and finding the balance between those types of properties which were further out in distance and still being able to get to where I needed to get to. So being able to commute very easily and quickly to work was really important to me. Being able to get around London very quickly so I could get to where my family were in the different areas was really important to me as well. And being able to spend time with my partner and getting around that way also. So for me, like, the area that I chose really factored into that. Also not spending a great amount of money on travel, so that was something that was really key. I wanted to be able to get around, but I didn't want to have to then suddenly sacrifice how much I was paying for a mortgage versus paying a lot more on my travel. So these are things I had to kind of take into account also. And once I found the happy medium for me, it worked out fine. Like, I moved further out. However, what I was paying as an increase on my travel wasn't massively extortionate, and for me to get into work was actually, to get back into central London was actually super quick. Like, the change was maybe an extra 15 minutes, but I was living a lot further out. So things like that, really worked to kind of think about your compromises that you can make in order to get what you want. Also, and this may sound again like a random thing or like an obvious thing, but thinking about how you can use your gifts to generate extra income for you. We kind of live in a society where there are so many ways in which you can earn secondary income. And so if you're thinking about ways in which you can save for a deposit quickly, are there any things that you can do which will help you to add to your income? So we've spoken already about how we budget for these things to remove extra expenses, but how can you add to your points? How can you secure the bag effectively? So do you have any gifts that you can use that can help you to generate some extra income, which means that you can then add to your pot for your deposit? There are other ways in which you can secure extra money for your deposit. Again, these ways you kind of need to look at them, research the pros and cons of these things, but thinking of as they call it, the bank of mum and dad. Do you have a way in which your parents or family or extended family could help you towards a deposit? Now, bear in mind, if you are securing a loan from a family member in order to use for a deposit, that has to be declared to your mortgage lender through your application, and the person who's lending you the money tends to have to be a guarantor to ensure that you will be able to pay back the mortgage. So these are things that you might want to consider, what impact that will have on you in order to move forward. Also be mindful of the fact, if they become the guarantor for your mortgage in that kind of scenario, if you suddenly can't pay it, they then become liable for it. So these are things that you want to really need to have, discuss with your family members to ensure that you're in a position that you can actually move forward to do these things. Because if you think, if saving for a deposit is going to be very difficult, you also have to be mindful, and I mentioned this in the last video, you have to be mindful of other things such as your fees, so your legal fees, your stamp duty and tax, and etc. These types of things that you have to pay on top of your deposit. But then also thinking more forward about how you actually pay your mortgage each month to ensure that you're not stretching yourself too thin. So these other things also go into the thought process. Another way which you can kind of limit the amount of deposit that you may need to pay on a purchase on a property is if you're buying with a second party. So for example, if you're buying with your partner, if you're buying with friends or family, obviously your deposit then will need to be smaller because you're actually amongst a group of you are sharing the amount that will need to be put down. Again, these are things that you need to really consider carefully because, for example, what happens if it's you and your partner, for example, and you split, or if it's you and a group of friends and one of the friends decides that they actually want to no longer be part in the property and wants to sell their share, what happens in those scenarios? So these are things that you also have to be very mindful of. It's not just as simple as, oh, we'll club together now, we'll do it, and then we'll figure that out when we get to that point. These are things that you really want to take into consideration because life will throw curveballs at you, and especially you don't want to be the one who's losing your home as well because of the decision of someone else. There are many options available to you, but the options that you choose will have a consequence of some sort should something happen. If you're thinking about how do you acquire your deposits and you think about the cost of deposits and less deposits, you can look into things such as shared ownership and shared equity, where these schemes require you to pay a lot less deposits, so that will typically range from about 5%, which means you're paying less out and should be easier to achieve than if you were going for the standard mortgage product. And then finally we have things such as the Help to Buy scheme, and the Help to Buy scheme works where you put down again 5% deposit, and then you have a government loan of up to a further 20% deposit in order for you to secure a property. Again, these are things that you really need to look into the T's and C's, different stipulations and restrictions if you have a mortgage such as this, or you take this type of scheme in order to secure a property. For example, things like you might not be able to sell on the property after a certain amount of time. If you do sell on the property before a certain amount of time, you may have to pay fees, etc. So these are things that you really need to be mindful of. But my best bit of advice in terms of thinking about how you secure a deposit is get advice from a mortgage broker and a financial advisor. The impartial company that I spoke to at the point when I was thinking about purchasing a property was LAKEY, and they are independent and so are able to give you impartial advice about and information about the different mortgage products which are available to you. And that was really, really helpful for me because it allowed me to get a better understanding of the overall market and position myself better, and gave me a bit more structure to think about how I could achieve what I was going for. So I would say get some impartial advice through a company such as LAKEY, get an understanding of what you can afford, get an understanding of what products are available to you, get an understanding of kind of what your typical repayments may look like, whether you go down the full repayment route, which is you paying a piece of the capital as well as the interest, or an interest only product, and understanding the differences and the consequences of which products you choose there, and use that as a way to kind of start structuring how you're going to move forward. Assess your expenses, make a budget, be disciplined about sticking to it. And all of these things you will notice will start to help you move forward, and you'll find that it will be much easier for you to get to your deposit goals. I hope that was really helpful for you. It's again a very short snippet. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line. Please like, comment and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.